All right, today we are diving into something that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a sci fi novel. We're looking at a blueprint for a biohybrid computer, one that actually uses living fungus to process information in a way that is, well, completely new.
I mean, forget silicon chips for a second. The core question this whole paper is built on is just so out there. What if this super delicate, complex network of a mushroom could actually become a part of an electronic circuit? What if we could get a living thing to compute?
Okay, so it is really important to get this right from the start. This is not some finished working gadget. What we're looking at is a theoretical paper, a detailed set of instructions. The author calls it an architect's declaration, which is awesome. It's basically throwing down the gauntlet, inviting the entire scientific community to come on in, try to build it, test it, and either prove that it works or prove that it's impossible. So, to get our heads around this wild idea, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the actual blueprint for this biocomputer. Then we'll dig into the three kind of bizarre ingredients that make it all tick. We'll follow a signal on its journey through the device, and then we'll get into the really cool part, how it reads information. After that, we'll see how you'd even know if it's working. And finally, we'll dream a little about what you could do with it.
Okay, let's get right into the blueprint. This isn't just some simple sensor we're talking about. The paper is proposing a whole new class of device, something that processes information by literally merging the biological world with the digital world. So the official name is a bit of a mouthful, a biohybrid topological amplifier. Let's just pick that apart. Biohybrid is easy, right? It uses living stuff and electronics. But the keyword, the one that changes everything, is topological. You see, unlike basically every sensor you've ever used, this thing isn't built to measure how strong a signal is. It's designed to read its shape.
So, how in the world does this thing actually work? Well, it all boils down to three core ingredients that, let's be honest, sound like a pretty weird combination. You need water, you need fungus, and you need a little jolt of electricity. The first ingredient is this absolutely bizarre physical trick called a floating water bridge. Seriously, if you put a high-voltage electric field between 2 cups of water, a tiny, self-supporting bridge of water can literally form between them, just hanging in the air. This device takes that idea and shrinks it way, way down to the nanoscale, creating a tiny little highway for an electrical signal to travel on. So where does the fungus fit in? Well, think about what happens in a forest after it rains. Those fungal networks, the mycelium, they become super electrically active. And their crazy, intricate, web-like structure. It turns out it's the perfect natural scaffold to form and, this is the important part, to stabilize thousands of these little water bridges. It turns the whole fungus into a living, conductive medium. Okay, so we've got our components. An electrical signal can now zip across this fungal network using these water bridges. But that brings us to the biggest, most important question of all. Why on earth would you want to measure a signal's shape instead of just its size? To answer that, you have to follow the signal on its three-stage journey as it gets converted from one form of energy to a totally different one. So it all starts at what's called the electrospore gate. That's where an electrical pulse zaps the fungus. That's your input. Second, the signal travels through the mycelium conduit, shooting across that web of water bridges we were just talking about. And third, and this is the wild part, the signal gets turned into a chemical output. The fungus releases a specific cloud of volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, which is really just a fancy way of saying it lets out a puff of a particular scent. The paper uses this fantastic analogy for what's happening here, a cube within cube. Just picture the signal's core shape as this perfect little cube of information. As that cube goes from being an electrical pulse to traveling through the fungus to coming out as a chemical cloud, its form of energy totally changes. But its essential structure, the cube itself, stays the same. The packaging is different, but the information inside is preserved. And this right here brings us to the absolute heart of the entire idea, the power of topology, which is just the mathematical study of shape. Think about a normal sensor. It measures a signal's amplitude, how high the peaks are. But that kind of information is super fragile. A tiny bit of electrical noise or interference, and your reading is totally corrupted. But a topological amplifier, it doesn't care about the height. It's measuring the signal's shape, things like the number of loops or holes within the data. And that kind of information is incredibly tough. It can survive the noisy, messy process of being passed through a living system.
This concept is just perfectly captured by the quote you see on the screen. Think about a plate and a donut. You can squish them, stretch them, deform them, but no matter what, the donut will always have one hole and the plate will always have none. That fundamental difference, the hole, that's its topological feature. That is the kind of rock-solid information this device is designed to read.
So the real question is, how do you measure this? The paper sets a very specific, very tough target for success. This number here, delta beta 1, you can think of it as the error score for the signal's shape as it goes through the device. The big goal is to keep that change below 5%. That would mean it's achieved a near-perfect preservation of the core information. And this is what makes it real science, not just a cool thought experiment. The author has laid out this whole series of clear, testable pass-or-fail gates that the device absolutely has to clear to be called a success. For example, you've got prediction P0. It basically asks, does the fungus actually help form the water bridge with less electricity? Then there's P1, that's the big one for signal integrity. Can it hit that target of less than 5% information loss? There are even predictions for human interface, like P4, which tests if a person's pupils actually dilate in response to the chemical smell it puts out. And of course, there are crucial safety gates, like P5, to make sure the device shuts down if it starts to overheat. What this all adds up to is just a fantastic example of open science. The entire blueprint is laid out for everyone to see, with a specific goal of being tested, replicated, and either proven right or proven wrong by anyone with the right tools.
So let's just imagine for a second that it actually works, that some lab somewhere builds this thing and it clears all those pass-fail gates. What could you actually do with a living computer that reads the shape of signals? Well, the possibilities are pretty fascinating. You could have these incredibly sensitive health monitors that can literally sniff out the subtle chemical cues of a disease, or low-power environmental sensors that act like living sentinels in a forest. You could even use it to create totally new forms of biodigital art, where an electrical signal orchestrates a whole symphony of sound and smell. And ultimately, each of these devices could just be one building block in much, much larger biocomputer networks. And this quote from the paper just perfectly captures the whole spirit of the project. This isn't about one person's single discovery. It's about giving everyone a clear, minimal, testable blueprint so that other engineers and scientists can just grab it and run with it without having to wait for the original author to do all the work. It's science as a team sport. Which leaves us with the final, really tantalizing question. Is this the actual blueprint for a living machine? A fundamental shift in how we think about computing? Or is it just a beautiful, incredibly imaginative idea that's ultimately a dead end? The paper is very clear about this. There's only one way to find out. Someone has to get in the lab and build it.